Welcome back to Rolando Estocada. My name is Rolando. Today we're going to be talking about the Tanto and its modern iterations and how I like to move with the Tanto based off of my own martial knowledge and my own understanding of the Japanese sword arts. So what we're looking at as far as the Tanto is concerned is that it comes from a very rich martial tradition in the Japanese culture. I am actually a collector, as you can tell, of Japanese swords, but specifically production swords. They're a little more accessible, a little more affordable, but it also allows me a type of entry point into Japanese swordsmanship that allows me to move with the swords. I have two sword collections. The one behind me, which is a mixture of Huawei swords, some Hanwei swords, and a couple of Ronin katana. But the other rack that I have is actually from Bugei, and I've been a big fan of Bugei's work, specifically the work of Sensei James Williams in the first iteration of the Bugei Sword Company. I've been a big fan of it, especially when Keith Larman, may he rest in peace, was overseeing the quality control. They did as much as they could, not only to make practice swords affordable, but also to even replicate of the historical and artistic motifs of previous Japanese sword designs. And as you can see, with that said, what I'm going to be looking at specifically as a model is another Sensei James Williams design. This is the CRKT Hira Zukuri 6. This is a 6-inch blade, which is based off of the Hira Zukuri design. And one thing I want you to note about the Tanto itself, let's take a look at this one specifically, is that it has a very slight curve, and this is called the sori, and it has this very slight curve, and from my own understanding is that the design itself allows the practitioner, whether it's a nodachi, katana, wakizashi, or even the Tanto, it allows the practitioner to move from the core. So if I'm moving any sort, if I'm moving with the blade, so that I'm going to make some sort of slicing motion or cutting motion, it's not an arm movement. It's not arm-centric. Because this curve here follows the curvature along the torso. So you have to be really connected with the blade through the arm, so the movement comes from the torso. And this is something that is also seen in another modern day iteration of the Tanto, a slightly bigger one. This is Cold Steel's Magnum Tanto XL, which I absolutely love. I actually love both of them. And I want you to note something in that when you have the kind of blade that you see on the Tanto, again, you see this very, very slight angle, the sori over here. What you'll see is a lot of blade and not a lot of handle, and that changes a lot of the dynamics of moving with the blade, let alone something as being able to go two-handed with it. So this is definitely a single hand tool, but because of that sori, its dynamics are very different from other single-handed tools like your Bowie knife or your kukri, because of that angle on the blade and the fact that the handle is so shorter compared to the blade. The movement dynamics that are required to make it effective and efficient requires something very specific in terms of your own quality movement. And what that is to make sure that even with a very small Tanto, like a 6-inch CRKT HZ6, the movements, even though light enough to move with the arm, it is not as efficient in terms of edge alignment, in terms of force production. It's not as efficient than if you turn it into a type of core-centric movement, so that that torque from your body is what's driving the movement and combinations with the knife. This is my own derivation of it based off of my understanding of the Tanto design, and also some of the principles that are the foundation of Japanese sword arts. So I'm looking forward to sharing this with you. I really hope you enjoy. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Stick around, stay tuned, more to come. The Magnum Tanto XL is 12 inches of very sharp and big blade. Here you see me move with it like it is a Bowie because it is of similar length, but it doesn't move like a big Bowie knife because of its dimensions. Its dimensions are very different. It doesn't have a big belly swell and it doesn't have the same width, so it doesn't have the same leverage and weight distribution. In fact, there are a couple of times here when I was trying to do snap cuts and it doesn't actually move the same way, and it jammed up my elbow a little bit, so it wasn't that fluid. However, when you start to move with it using your core and you start turning and moving forward with it, coming from the core, as in the Japanese term, the hara, when you move from your core, all of a sudden, the tanto moves a little bit more like a sword. And when it moves more like that, it honors the design more and it honors the arts that it comes from. That's something to think about, because when you're moving with it and slashing through with a tanto, it's a very, very small sword, at least with the Magnum Tanto XL. So when you go ahead and slash through, note that my shoulders and my hips are actually aligned so that once I slash through, my entire body weight goes right through it to support it. Now we're going to take a look at the CRKT HZ6. So it is of Hira Zukuri design, but technically it is from the same lineage as the Magnum Tanto XL in that, number one, it has that smaller handle, but that smaller handle allows me to really comfortably put it into a push dagger position. And that push dagger position makes it so that it is very comfortable to transition into a funnel grip, into a P-call grip, and now as I flow over into the other side of that rack and then move on to a traditional ice pick grip, this HZ6 is actually the most comfortable close quarters knife I've ever handled, simply from the perspective of moving from one grip transition to another while allowing me to use my core to move the entire blade. So here as I cut through, note that my hip movements allows me to power through with the blade, but at the same time transition smoothly from one grip to another. So as I power through using my hip and even jamming with my shoulder, note that the transitions in the grips allows me to go from different angles because that handle is shorter. So with that shorter grip, it allows me to go from traditional grip, funnel, into P-call, and even into push dagger. This is the most comfortable knife I've ever handled in close quarters, and I really enjoy it a lot. And by doing so, it changes my knife practice so that I can introduce more of the Japanese methodology as far as biomechanics and movement quality is concerned. Note my ability to go from foil grip to push dagger grip. A lot of that has to do with the short handle design that has been applied to the CRKT HZ6. The main thing to consider is that its fluidity in transitioning from one grip to another. Very comfortable and ultimately very smooth. This kind of flow is something that you can also apply to some of the other knives that are available out there in the market. But do consider that the handle isn't necessarily as proportioned as the same way as the HZ6. This is a very unique feature of the HZ6. For example, take a look at the Buck Nighthawk with that extra puño. That extra puño is actually very favorable in most Filipino martial arts styles and in most knife combatives, and it is still allowing the transitions that I was showing earlier, but not as smoothly because that puño actually gets in the way. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Stick around, stay tuned, more videos to come.